Go ahead and start. Ed, if you want to lead us off.
I do. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ed Emmett. I have the privilege of co-chairing the Freight Committee meeting this afternoon. But full disclosure, this afternoon's committee meeting was put together by Brian and Veronica and some others. And this is a meaty meeting, little alliteration there. I appreciate everybody being here. But before we get started, I have a few things that I need to say. You know, we look at all the issues that are going on today, and clearly we live in interesting times, but we can't lose sight of the fact that transportation assets and transportation policy and what we do with transportation is absolutely critical. Whether we're talking about mobility, which is what most people think about, gee, can I get from here to there? Or lately, even the average person has come to know the term supply chain and the importance of it, and the problems that we are having. But what seems to be overlooked a little bit is safety. Everybody wants our transportation assets, our highways, our roadways to be safe. But what are we going to do about it? And that's what today's meeting is going to focus on a lot. Not only mobility and how goods move, but how do we make sure that they move safely? And what really intrigues me about today is we have speakers who, you know, now that I'm in the academic world at the Baker Institute at Rice, I can say this with a straight face. We're not talking theory today. We're talking some real life examples. We're going to have some speakers that are out there on the roads, and they know what happens and what needs to happen. And I know today we're really preaching to the choir, those of you who have taken the time to join us. But we need the choir to start singing, because if we don't, then we're going to end up with a situation where we have infrastructure bills that pass that don't do anything to enhance safety. We have public officials who seem to lose sight of the purpose of our highway system and other transportation assets. So those of you who are listening, we need a multiplier effect here. We need people to start talking about it and start talking about the need for a regional transportation plan that embraces improvements to what is frankly an old transportation system. And if we don't upgrade it and we don't keep it safe, and when I look at the technology that's available today, the fact that we have so much technology available to help us keep not only the vehicles safer, but the roadways themselves. So we have a lot of great speakers. I can't take the time to thank all of them, but this is a great program that's been put together by Brian and Veronica and others. So at this point, let me turn it over to Veronica. I'm going to mute myself and sit back and listen and learn, because there's a lot to learn from this group today. So thank you all for being here. Veronica, I think it's up to you now.
Okay, great. And slides. Okay. Making sure slides look a little different on my screen. Good afternoon, everyone. If you didn't already know, my name is Veronica Green. I'm the freight planner here at HGAC, and I also help facilitate this meeting for the Greater Houston Freight Committee. And I'm very, very excited to have this topic, as well as these two co-chairs that have supported me for the past year and a half that we've been doing this virtually. I'm super excited about this project that we've been waiting on for quite a while, and it's the Regional Goods Movement Plan update. The last time the Regional Goods Movement Plan was updated was in 2013. And this will be a study, it'll be an update to the 2013 study, and will expand upon the goals of the previous study. So what is goods movement? Goods movement is goods movement is how we move, is the variety of activities that we use in order to move. If you go back a couple of slides. Yes. we can look at this. We can start here with the study area. It'll encompass all 8 counties. The most recent study that was looked at was the Ports Area Mobility Study, which only looked at the 3 port counties. So this will be an expansion of what was previously done in the last couple of years. It will be multimodal in purpose. So it'll look at the freight highway network, the rail network, the marine highway, as well as multimodal connectors. Next slide. What is goods movement? It's the variety of activities that are needed in order to move products from producers to consumers. The regional goods movement plan is meant to be a long-range plan for goods movement system within the region, and it is meant to promote the economic development of the region, as well as address the mobility challenges, mitigate the environmental impacts, and contribute to the community livability. So that is the ultimate goal of the regional goods movement thus far. Next slide. And as a part of this, there'll be a commodity flow. Again, the last commodity flow done for the region was also during the Ports Area Mobility Study, which only took into account 3 regions. So this will take into account all 8 of the counties that are represented by the MPO, and it will also it'll also take a look at what the key industries are, as well as what the region's supply chain profile. These things will be utilized to support a variety of activities, but it'll collect data about commodity flows by mode, trade types, tons, value, the origin destination by not only country, but also county, as well as truck flows throughout the region. Next slide. So this is a slide that you can skip this slide. As a result, coupling this with some additional data collection, we will be developing a data dashboard that will be available to the public. It will create, one part will be a story map similar to the one that you see here for Southeast Harris County, and it'll collect demographic data based upon freight-related activities, whether it be employment, value of freight, or ton miles by mode of transportation, and give us a better look at what the supply chain profiles for the region look like as well. Next slide. It'll also create some interactive maps that will be available to the public as well via the HGAC website. So we'll be doing some critical things largely sponsored through the Greater Houston Freight Committee, such as an update to the regional freight network, as well as the updated critical urban freight network, which this committee had a vital hand in updating a few years ago. We'll be looking at the at-grade crossings and recommendations made as a result of the Houston-Beaumont rail study, as well as looking at the existing proposed and planned freight projects for the region. So this will be something that's publicly available and interactive as well, and it's what we're calling a data dashboard. Next slide. As a result, we'll also be able to continue to build upon the things that were created in the data dashboard and use that information. And we are developing a brand spanking new truck travel demand model, which I'm super excited about. It is activity-based. This is the first time the HGAC has attempted to do this, but it'll give us a more accurate look at what truck travel demand look like and what truck traffic and through traffic looks like for the region. And so it'll do everything from forecasting to from forecasting what the future looks like. Also, in the future, we'll be able to look at how we can make changes to infrastructure and changes and how changes in policies and operational strategies will affect traffic and truck travel demand and goods mobility within the region. It is expected to be both macroscopic, so looking at it as a region as a whole, as well as mesoscopic. So it gives us some of those key corridors that may be missing from the high level. Next slide. From that, we'll have, of course, an origin destination matrix for truck patterns. We'll be able to look at a report for key issues and challenges, as well as we'll have a new and exciting look at what freight significant corridors looks like for the region. Next slide. From that, we'll have a memo, which I think will be critical to where we want to move forward as a region to prioritizing the policies and programs and projects for the region. So we'll be establishing a defined criteria for how we evaluate freight-related projects and the recommendations that we make to other committees, such as the Transportation Policy Council or the Transportation Advisory Council, based upon what we believe are in the best interest for the freight in the region, whether it be via the ports or through the rail or via trucking. It'll establish short, midterm, and long-term recommendations for the region. And ultimately, next slide, the final will be an evaluation and monitoring tool. So this is something that's super interactive for the public as well as planners and other academics to use to be able to look at what kinds of changes can be implemented over time or over short periods or midterm periods of time to look at to evaluate the cost and benefits of the region. And next slide. And we do have a new feature that we're utilizing for public outreach, of course, with the changing times, with COVID impacting it. We have created an online presence, a web-based site for public outreach, and just to keep members of this group, as well as anyone who's actively interested in what freight looks like in the region. And it's called Bang the Table. We'll find it on the Engage website, which I'll also post in the chat because it was supposed to be on the slide. But you'll be able to track the progress of the track the progress of the project. There'll be surveys, there'll be polls that can be interactive, and there's of course links to the interactive map and the story map. So we'll be utilizing this as a tool to also to be able to post some of the meetings that have been recorded, as well as being able to allow others to track when meetings will actually be occurring. You'll see here is a picture to the right of the draft pages of what that looks like so far. So some definitions, some project timelines, and stories about what has happened and freight critical stories that have happened in the region most recently. Next slide. This is what our project schedule looks like. We expect this to wrap this up by August of 2023, so approximately 2 years to kind of get this done. And this is how it's laid out in the tasks. Next slide, there will be a series of meetings, 6 steering committee meetings, whom I'm also looking for participants for, 6 and 5 stakeholder meetings and 2 public meetings to make sure that we're keeping the public in mind as we endeavor to promote economic development for the region. Next slide. And again, the contacts for this meeting is myself, Veronica Green, and I can be reached at veronica.green@hgac.com. And my deputy project manager is Shirley Lee, and you can also find her at shirley.lee@hgac.com. And next slide. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time out to listen to some of a super exciting freight project or freight study that we have going on here at HGAC.
Thanks, Veronica. I think, like Ed said, what you just did was lay the big picture of planning, study, infrastructure. And to Ed's point, now's our opportunity to weave safety into that conversation at the planning stage, right? Not when it's too late, but at the front end. For example, you can't look at trucks and truck traffic these days without thinking about truck parking and congestion. And that has a real impact on safety. So these are things that, when it comes to the state of safety in our region, we have the opportunity, especially with the infrastructure, bill hopefully happening, that we have an opportunity as we grow and as we redevelop and redefine our region. We can bring freight safety into it at the planning stage, not at the, oh, it's too late stage. And with that, let's move to the state of safety report from the Houston-Galveston Area Council. And now we're going to dig deeper and deeper for the rest of the afternoon into freight safety and what we've got to do in our region to raise the bar. So David, welcome.
Welcome. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
All right. Let me go over the 2020 State of Safety Report. I'm David Fink. I'm the Program Manager for Regional Incident Management and Safety. Next slide, please. Okay, you got it? I'll go back one, Veronica, or one. Okay, the information in this report covers 5 years from 2016 to 2020. It covers 13 crash types, and we are reporting on crashes, fatal injuries, and serious injuries. Next slide, please. This is the 13 crash types that are reported in the report. And as you can see, commercial vehicles is one of those items that we report on. And we'll dive deeper into commercial vehicle crashes that are reported in the crash reports, which is the crash information system from TxDOT. Next slide, please. But first, a few quick facts. In 2020, with COVID in effect, overall crashes were down, but unfortunately, the number of fatalities was up. That fatal increased by 11% overall from 661 in 2019 to 737 in 2020. And unfortunately, we're on pace now to, it looks like, to overcome that 737 too. So we need to address safety here. Next slide. Okay, this slide here shows the overall commercial vehicle crashes in 2020, as in the overall number of crashes. That number was down. It is down actually by 23%, which was good. But unfortunately, just like in overall crashes, next slide, the number of fatalities was up because we had more severe crashes out there. In 2020, it was at 63, which is actually a 46% increase over 2019. And a lot of this, even though the data doesn't show it, but talking to law enforcement, seems to be due to speeding. Next slide. Serious injuries. Oh, go back one, Veronica. Serious injuries pretty much remain stable. Unfortunately, most of these ended up in fatals instead of serious injuries, and we only showed a slight increase of 2%. Next slide. This here is a heat map of all crashes on divided highways that involve commercial vehicles. So you can see the hot spots, I-45, the North Loop between 225 and 45 on the 610 loop, and all basically most interchanges out there. Next slide. And this map here shows overall where commercial vehicles had fatal injuries out there in the region. You know, you do concentrate again inside the Beltway along interchanges, but they're spread throughout. So I supplemented some of this data with Houston TranStar data. Next slide. When I ran the CRIS report, it did not do a good reporting on hazmat crashes. So I went into the Houston TranStar database, and I'm showing around 180 hazmat incidents per year, and it keeps around that amount. You can have a very calm month, and then another month it's very busy, but we average around about 180 per year. Next slide. The other thing that is occurring with a lot of commercial vehicles is we're experiencing bridge hit. The Houston TranStar database recorded 22 bridge hits in 2020. We are now this year at 10. In fact, the Taylor Street Bridge, I believe, was hit again this week. This could be overcome simply by drivers knowing the height of their load and looking at that. So this is something that causes lots of congestion, lots of delays on the freeways, and can overcome simply, you know. The other thing that is happening is they're using GPS for tracking and or guidance, and it's telling them to go inside the loop where high loads are not permitted. But that's a lot of scenarios that we see out there when we talk to these drivers, that they were just following their GPS and weren't paying attention to the bridge heights. Next slide. So where to find this report? This report can be found at that web address there, or you could simply go to the HGAC website. On the front page, click on public safety, and then you can click on transportation safety planning, and the report is at that location, and that's what your page looks like. Next slide. So are there any questions?
I think, David, if it's okay with you, we're going to save the questions to the end.
That is fine.
And I would encourage people to either ask them live or use the Q&A or the chat function. But, you know, one thing that I mean, this is a rhetorical question, but it just baffles me is, you know, in 2020 with COVID, you know, a lot of people were, you know, offices were closed. I mean, traffic should have been down, and yet we saw severity up. So while I'm changing my screen over, can you comment on that, and then we'll have more questions in just a minute.
Well, that was observed overall. You know, congestion was down, but I'm going to say congestion is good because it's hard to kill somebody when you're moving 5 miles an hour. It's not good for the economy, but it is good for safety because you're not moving at those high speeds. Again, speaking with law enforcement, there was a lot of single vehicle crashes out there, basically due to speed. And you had your open freeways, and they were traveling at higher rates of speeds.
Okay, well, thank you. What we're going to do now is I did my presentation in a video format primarily for one reason, because if I get going on this topic, I could way exceed the time that I've got allowed. So the video kind of kept me within my time budget. I'm going to play this video for you. It kind of paints the picture of where I see things from my standpoint in the trucking industry, and sort of a call to action at the end about what we can do now to raise the bar on the state of safety in our region. So bear with me while I switch over to the video. And if you can't see it or hear it, let me know. You should be able to see this and hear it in just a second. I'm so glad that the Greater Houston Freight Committee has devoted this session, this meeting, to the state of safety in our region. I mean, after all, if we can't do our jobs safely, are our jobs worth doing at all? We're going to learn from a diverse group of panelists today about their perspectives on safety in the region. I want to start the conversation with, when it comes to freight, the person that's at the heart of safety, the professional truck driver. Let's take a look at what we see every day in our region from the cab of a truck. Watch this video with me. It's pretty eye-opening, isn't it? Now, we spent some time with one of our professional drivers, Jorge Chavez, about his view of the state of safety in our region. Let's take a look at our interview with Jorge. He couldn't be with us today because he's out on the road working for our customers. But I hope this video will let you understand safety from the perspective of a professional truck driver.
Hola, this is Jorge Chavez from Houston, Texas. I've been in the trucking industry for 18 years and I am currently employed with Jeco Delivery, and I've been working with Jeco the last 8 years of my career. I really enjoy and love my job because from my childhood, I always dreamed to become a professional driver, and over the years, here I am. So, which industry I work for and what type of freight do we haul? Well, it could be many. I work for the intermodal industry. If you can see right here on my back, it's an overseas containers, and we can have any type of freight from groceries, medicine, lumber, construction material, chemicals, anything, you name it. And this time I'm here in San Antonio with one of our clients, and I'm picking up these fiber pipes, which is related to the oil industry. And this pipe is going straight to Argentina. I am a regional driver and also I do local work. So most of the time I'll be home every night. I do some over the road sometimes, but I try to stay closer to my family so I can go home every night. As a professional driver, I have concerns, and I would like to share with you two of them. The first one is infrastructure. I just shared a few minutes ago how great it feels when you're approaching to any city and you see improvement on their highways, on their freeways, on their overpasses. This is positive. So I would like to encourage you to keep the good work and keep doing those nice improvements that help everyone, not just me. I would like to send a message to those in power, politicians, people that are leaders, that don't quit helping us here. There is a lot to do, and I know together we can achieve anything. This is not about left, this is not about right. This is about a common goal for everyone, for the American people. What things I do to keep myself, my equipment, the cargo, and the traveling public safe? That's a very easy question. I repeat to myself the commitment that I made 18 years ago to stay safe, that I'm gonna deliver every single load safely, on time, and that I'm gonna do all that is on my power to protect the general public around me. I will never forget that promise. That's what I do every day, and I want to say thank you for listening to these videos and to share the road with us. Stay safe, God bless, and God bless America.
I'd like to thank Jorge for his time, and I hope you found his comments and his thoughts to be instructive. Now, let's move our conversation into what's competing for safety. Because what you see on the roads often is a manifestation of what goes on inside of companies throughout our region and really everywhere. Number one of the biggest barriers to safety is abdicated safety leadership, right? The idea that safety is a department. Well, in our world, safety has to be a way of life. You cannot delegate safety. Everybody owns safety. And while that's true in our safety-sensitive organizations, it has to also be true in how we conduct ourselves on the road. Nothing is worth rushing. That phone call, that text message, it's not worth it. Another thing that kind of gets in the way of raising the bar on safety is a focus on blame. Now, if there's a crash, obviously, we have to know what happened. Our root cause analysis has to let us know where the fault was. I get that. But the real focus, if we want to raise the bar on safety, is prevention. We need to look at crashes, at common areas, at bad roads, and figure out how do we prevent, as opposed to just finger pointing. Now, when it comes to trucks, I do want to make this point. Statistics that show vehicle crashes involving trucks in and of themselves really aren't that useful, because you have to figure out when was the truck driver responsible for the crash, and when was the truck involved in a crash due to another vehicle. Think about the video that we just watched together. Getting to the root cause is important, but the real name of the game has to be prevention. We've got to stop deflecting and sugarcoating. We can take all the victory laps we want on our economy. And in this region, we deserve the victory laps. I mean, our economy is resilient, our economy is robust, and it's growing. But if we can't do our job safely, as I said before, then what are we really doing, right? We need to see vehicle crashes come down. You know, as traffic volumes went down during the COVID era, crashes still went up, right? What's up with that? We've had our share of plant fires, plant explosions, etc. You have to make sure that we put safety as number one, right? Because ultimately, an unsafe environment will hinder production. We've got to make the investments in infrastructure to be sure that our roadways are keeping up with our demands. Because if we don't, we're going to have, by design, literally by design, an unsafe situation. I think one of the main things that competes for safety is right up here. Now, we can talk about distractions, and certainly cell phone use is a major distraction. But when we're behind the wheel, it's so much more than the cell phone. We're mentally distracted in a million different ways. And in my mind, most companies are so busy right now that one of the biggest things that gets in the way is production pressure. We have to be sure that we're balancing production pressure with safety. So why do I have this picture of Kobe Bryant up here? So I want you to focus on the National Transportation Safety Board's conclusions when it came to the helicopter crash that killed Kobe and 7 other passengers. Was production pressure involved? You bet. But not the kind of production pressure that you might think, not a manager or a company pushing that pilot into an unsafe decision. We have to focus more on self-induced pressure. If you read the NTSB's conclusions, the pilot that was involved in the crash was Kobe's favorite pilot. It's the only pilot that Kobe trusted to fly his kids unaccompanied. You have to look at the pressure that we put on ourselves. So in the case of the crash, we had a situation where clearly the pilot made a decision to fly when he shouldn't have, because he did not want to let his client, Kobe Bryant, down. And we know the result. So what's going on inside of our heads? What's causing us to cut corners, to compete for safety? Well, a lot of things. As I said before, the pilot did not want to let his client down. Superman syndrome, right? I can do this. I've been doing this for 20 years. I can take that shortcut. Get home-itis. I want to get home. Let's cut corners because I've got to be home for a Little League game. Poor planning, organization, mixed messages, right? Messages that allow our teams to think that something is more important than safety. All of these things, which are contained right up here in our heads, are competing for safety every day. And we have to come together to help our teams manage their own production pressures and be sure that we're not placing undue pressure on anybody performing safety-sensitive tasks on our roadway. So a couple of things that have worked for me that I'll share with you on maybe how we can raise the bar together on safety. First of all, quit talking about safety as a priority. Safety is not a priority. Safety has to be a value. You see, priorities shift. They can shift, they do shift, and it's okay. I could come to work today with a list of 10 things to do. I get a phone call, I've got a customer problem, my list just got rearranged. Those are priorities. Safety is a value, meaning nothing. No deadline, no load, can compete for safety. We don't compromise our values. So let's make sure that we leave this meeting committing how we conduct ourselves on the road and how we lead those around us, that safety is a value and nothing can compete for safety. You know, when you look at accidents and crashes, the big contributors are speed, distraction, shortcuts. Sometimes that's individual behavior, nothing more, nothing less. You know, an employee was trained to do something and they chose to do it the wrong way. They chose to disregard the rules and regulations. I get that. But sometimes I wonder if continued bad behavior is more a reflection of what's going on inside the company at which that driver works. Because I'm very certain from my experience, this is about behavior, and that company can cause a crash as easily as an individual. Yet sometimes we only look at the man or woman whose hands are on the wheels. We don't look deeper. I think a lot of bad behavior that we see on the roads can be the result of broken company cultures. That's where we need to continue to focus in the businesses that we lead. This triangle, this pyramid shows it another way. I'll talk to my team this way. 30,000 unsafe decisions and conditions leads to 3,000 crashes or accidents or injuries with no major outcome, 300 with lost time, 30 disablements and 1 fatality. And I asked my team, where do you want to spend your time? You want to be good at cleaning up the mess? Focus on the top 4 rungs of the pyramid. You want to be good at prevention, because after all, that's what safety is. It's prevention. Then focus on the unsafe conditions, unsafe decisions, unsafe behaviors that are contributing to crashes. And again, that's where, if we really want to raise the bar on safety, on our roadways, in our region, we need to look at the behaviors and the causes and the underlying contributors, so that we collectively, private, public enterprise, can practice prevention. As you do your jobs in academia, public policy, or in the private sector, I want you to ignore for a minute severity. Here's a picture of a driver that obviously lost his way and tore up some grass. Now, you could look at this and you could say, all right, tore up some grass, call the landscaper and move on. It was a minor deal. No, that's the wrong way to look at it. You see, it was just a matter of luck that there wasn't a kid standing there. The failure in this case was the driver was not aware of his surroundings. The fact that he tore up some grass and didn't run over a person is a matter of luck, nothing more, nothing less. Severe outcomes generally are nothing more than a matter of happenstance and luck. If we really want to practice prevention, if we really want to lower the frequency of crashes, we have to understand what's causing them, whether or not the outcome is minor, so that we can get all the data and make the right decisions for us collectively to raise the bar on safety on the roads in our region. I want to ask you this. What's the real cost of an incident, the real cost of a crash? You know, it's a lot more than we think. A lot of times people will say, well, you know, insurance paid this much money out, that was the cost. Wrong. We have to understand the cost of incidents, the cost of bad behavior on a much more global and holistic basis. For example, when there's a crash, yes, you've got the economic totals. You've got impacts on your business. Enough crashes are going to really impact employee morale. They're going to wonder, what kind of company am I working for? And then you've got your reputation. Customers might start to say, hey, I really don't want to work with this rogue operator. They're spending more time cleaning up the mess than I care to deal with. You know, safety is good business. But the most important cost is the one that you can't put a dollar sign on. And that's the loss of life, the loss of mobility. It's the human toll. So let's never, ever talk about safety in our region from a pure dollars and cents standpoint, because the money just begins to tell the story. The real story is the human toll. Take a look at this spreadsheet. I'll be glad to send you a copy. If you really want to get to the real cost of a crash, you have to fill in each of these boxes every time, regardless of whether an incident is severe or the outcome is minor, because there's a tremendous cost of being unsafe. I have people say, you know, well, safety is expensive. Well, if you think safety is expensive, I got news for you. Consider the opposite. And that leads me to a final thought, which is I'd like to call for more collaboration. I see it in three ways, okay? Education, enforcement, and legislation. I've seen public-private working groups, public-private collaborations do tremendous things for safety. And in our region, I'd like to see more of it. Ride-alongs, come ride with one of our drivers, right? Let's go spend time with enforcement to see what they're seeing. Let's make sure that we're using cutting-edge tools in our companies to teach and train our employees. Education, enforcement, I mean strict enforcement, not a slap on the hand for bad behavior, and then legislation. For example, in Texas, yes, we've got a distracted driving law, I get that, but the reality is it has no teeth. We need legislation with teeth if we want to change behavior. And by changing behavior, we can ultimately raise the bar on safety in our region. So with that, I thank you for your time, and let's get on with our panel. Okay, thank you. I'm going to now just quickly reshare the screen with our PowerPoint. So give me a second just to get resituated here. I also, since before I began the video, when I began the video, Jeff Tippett joined us, and Jeff is with the LaPorte Police Department. And Jeff, well, I've got you on. You're one of our panelists, but do you have a slide deck, or are you not going to use a slide deck?
You're muted.
You have to be unmute, Jeff.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, my PowerPoint, my slide presentation was not completed, and I had issues with my computer at the station, so I won't be having it. But as soon as it's completed, I will forward that to you to send out to everybody.
Well, then what I'm going to do is call on you, Mr. Tippett, and ask you to go ahead, because I just sort of gave from the perspective of the trucking company, and we shared the driver's perspective. So let's flip it over to you, and let's put in enforcement's perspective, and I'm going to move it over to Jason, and we're going to talk then about truck technology. Technology is making us safer. But Jeff, take it away.
Good. I want to thank y'all for inviting me to participate in this organization. I'm truly blessed and humbled by it. Excuse me. At the present time, I'm up in San Marcos at the Texas Transportation Association Safety Management Council, and there. One of the things that is up here is through TEEX, and on the enforcement side of it is what we're seeing is some of I don't want to say trouble companies, but some of those companies that push, as you were saying, push the dollar before the safety. The culture is just completely wrong, and we see that in the type of accidents that we run across. For example, we've had a rollover in which the driver was running at 115,000 pounds, completely rolled the truck over on its upside down, and they had no operating authority, no insurance. The driver had no CDL. It had been suspended, or not suspended, but had been downgraded for various reasons. But nonetheless, that's what we had been seeing out here. But in the same time, that's not the common thing we find. That is fortunately very rare. What we do see, though, is the drivers that are put into the trucks that have not gone through adequate training, as you could say, They were just simply to fill a seat to make the run, and because the driver shortage is critical, so they're looking for anything and everything. The issue we see again is on the training that the drivers are not getting from how to handle the equipment, specialty equipment, and so forth. Example of that is an automatic transmission carrying a liquid load. They're not really in tune to carry the deal with the hydraulic movement of the load, especially if it's a 3/4 load. I had a truck roll over in which the transmission shifted due to the hydraulic movement of the fluid he was carrying, and it downshifted as he was making the turn, and it shifted everything even further up, and it rolled the truck to its side. The immediate reaction from the company was, "You're terminated." The driver had been driving for 30 plus years. Now he's without a job. I think there should have been a little bit more investigation. And when I questioned the company about it, that's what kind of training did you do your driver on this automatic? He said, "It's a truck, it's an automatic, there's no difference." And of course, yes, there is. One of the other issues though is educating the public around the trucks. As far as the enforcement side of it, we hear it all the time whenever I'm doing a roadside inspection on a truck driver, is why aren't you out there talking to the car drivers? And one of the things we've done in the past within my community at the Sylvan Beach Festival is we would actually set up trucks with trailer and put cars around it and a W100 Kenworth on the passenger side in the blind spots, have people climb in the truck and say, "Find the vehicles." And what it did, we also had numerous handouts. And what it was to educate the public, hey, when you're around these trucks they can't see, you stay out of the blind spots, don't ride beside them, and move on. And all of them could not even find a KW100. And those of you not familiar with it, that's a big cab over truck. And you don't think you could hide it. We hit it. And without having to put it close to the truck, we just moved it back to the blind spot off the mirrors. So that was a very large eye-opening experience, and it was received very popular by the public. Unfortunately, we backed off of it for a few years, and we are re-implementing this. And that's something that I think we could do on a regional basis through all the different functions, all the different festivals and so forth, that we could go out and reach out to the public. Texas A&M Engineering Extension Services, in partners with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, is starting a program for youth or a teen-led initiative to go outside and educate peer-to-peer on safety around commercial trucks. And they've actually developed an app for Android and Apple, or for iPhones. And it's called You in the Driver's Seat. And it has a responsibility, has its rewards, and it allows them to keep track of what's going on. It educates them with things. My issue is that it's a phone app, and that's the last thing we need people looking at on the road is more phone apps. However, it's a start where hopefully they have the phone set in a mode where it will not operate while it's being in a vehicle and moving. One of the things I heard them talk about was the technology regarding GPS. Couple of the companies in the area had such a problem with the drivers using their cell phones GPS system, which we all know is geared towards a passenger car. It's not geared towards commercial trucks, truck routes, or anything like that. They've actually implemented policies saying you will not use your GPS phone off your cell phone for any kind of guidance. If it's not off our system that we've mapped for you, it's not to be used. We still have drivers that show up in the middle of neighborhoods or down roads that are dead end, that they were simply following the GPS on their cell phone, and that's not geared for the vehicles that they're operating. And that's one of the things that we're point out to the drivers. And if we do catch them off the truck route or in a situation like that, we're documenting the fact that the driver was using his cell phone GPS system, and he had no system out there that was utilized regarding commercial trucks and truck routes. There is systems out there that they can purchase. Yes, they're expensive, and that's where something that I don't know the solution to that would be, other than a company helping them buy it if it's an owner operator, or if it's a company truck purchasing it. But then again, that's a little bit outside my league on enforcement. The teeth that we're putting into it, we're seeing more of the courts not being as lenient on the drivers when they come into court for violations, from moving violations such as that. In fact, the regulations are is if they're in a moving violation with a CDL, there is no deferred or anything like that. It's stuck on them. If they're found guilty, it attains to their record as such with the CDL. And they're not allowed to get defensive driving deferred or anything else that can take it off the record. The other issue is also some of the equipment violations. They'll get the deferred numerous times. They'll not get stopped, and then it doesn't show up on their record anymore. However, we can document off the inspection report. We have access to all the previous inspections of the truck, trailer, and driver as far as the violations. So we enlist that in there. Hey, they've been documented for this before. They were issued citations for this before in the past. And the courts are taking more notice of that. They may not be able to issue the fines as much as far as a habitual offender. However, they're very reluctant to follow any kind of guidance regarding deferred or anything that could keep it off their record. They're saying, they're actually looking at the statistics that we're seeing, the information we're putting on the inspection reports. So that's one of the things that we've improved on, along with some of the additional training we're receiving through DPS, as well as on the enforcement side on some of the new technology that's out there and how to look for it and to ensure that the drivers are utilizing it correctly. Some of that also deals with us training the drivers themselves. That's one of the things we reach out to them if they pull in where we're at doing inspections. If a driver pulls in and says, explain this to me. It's a freebie day for them. What do you need to know? Let's get the books out. Let's go through it. Let's explain to, step by step what we're looking at, or this new rule just comes out and they're not familiar with it. Even the safety personnel are calling us up and are showing up out there saying, explain this to me. Show me what you're seeing. And we'll be glad to. We'll spend a full day with them working with us, along with the drivers. They have sent drivers out to ride with us to see what we're looking at, how we're doing the inspections, what we're looking for, and what the drivers are expected to look for. And that, again, is education and training on some of these drivers. And the amazing part is it's the older drivers that are more apt to come in and ask us questions than it is the younger drivers. I don't know if it's that I'm too good for this or I don't have time for this, got to keep making the money. But for the most part, it's the more senior drivers that are coming in, asking us for the information, the questions, and asking for guidance on certain things. And we quickly put it out there. Hey, tell everybody, come in. We were here to help you. We want to reduce the number of violations we see, but also in reducing the number of violations, we're seeing the reduction in accidents and the severity of the accidents themselves. And in that aspect where I'm at, we've been blessed in seeing not as many severe accidents as we've had in the past. I don't know if that's due to COVID. Again, I have seen more speeding accidents where the cars were traveling at higher rates of speed, producing, more violent crashes. But as far as the commercial trucks, we've not seen that as much this past few years. Again, I'm attributing that to COVID, but I'm also attributing that to the lack of congestion, and the drivers are having a little bit more better maneuverability in the roads and things. But the main issue as far as educating the public around it is that's a two-way street in which both the trucking companies and the motoring public need to be together, and that's where community outreach would be best for us to set up these no-zone displays at the various events, along with having the trucks out there so people can ask the questions. And then again, also us attending the safety meetings for the companies, going to the different events where they have the truck drivers, from the truck drivers rodeos and pre-trip competitions and things like that, and reaching out to the drivers is what we're doing the most good at, is reaching out to them and advising them, this is the new laws, this is what we're seeing, this is what needs to be changed. But there again, that takes time with not so much with us, which we can get all the time we need, but it's just reaching out to the public and the motorists, and to let them know what's the safest things around the trucks, as well as the truck drivers. One of the things I do like to do, and it never leaves any of the drivers happy with me when I'm at the safety meetings, but I'll have them bring pictures of their families. I'll put all the pictures in a hat or a box, shake it up, pull a driver up, so pull this picture out. And he'll hold the picture up, say, whose family is this? Somebody out there say, that's my family. So I want you to tell this man what you're going to do to ensure the safety of his family. What are you going to do to ensure that his family gets home safe while you're out there motoring around him. They can never finish without crying. So, but that's some of the things that we're doing on the enforcement side that's not just writing the tickets. To me, that's a minor thing. It's reaching out to them and educating the drivers, showing what we're looking at, showing what we're seeing, as well as educating the motoring public in the hopes to reducing the number of accidents we have out there, as well as increase the flow of goods coming in and out of the ports, because we're growing down there with the Barbers Cut and Port of Bayport, along with the warehousing and the number of chemical plants that are increasing their production down there. But that's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what I think the enforcement side, along with the education and training side, needs to be working hand in hand from the motoring public to the transportation companies as well. That's what I'd like to see us move forward with.
Jeff, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. People might thought that you and I compared notes beforehand, but you and I will both attest that we didn't. But what are some of the things that Jeff talked about? Culture, education, what production pressure is doing, causing people to cut corners, collaboration, public-private, and really it's about people, isn't it? Right? In other words, you can have great technology and you can have the infrastructure investment, but if we don't put the people first, and I'm talking about professional drivers, enforcement, and the traveling public, we're not going to, overcome the challenge we've got. And so I really want people to take away Jeff's focus on people and also a call for action, right? I think the HGAC can and should be a venue to further disseminate the education activities Jeff was talking about. I mean, you get into a truck and look at the blind spots, you'll never forget that.
And that's one of the aspects that when we did the blind spots did the blind spot demonstrations, we had people that jump out and immediately go grab their teenage sons and daughters or anybody in their family to come out and immediately start saying, get up in there, I want you to look at this. Says, I want you to see how when you're driving around these trucks, to stay away from them. There's always one or two saying that's why we don't need big trucks on the road during normal hours, but you're never going to convince them of anything. But for the most part, for the huge part, we were received very well, and it was a very positive reaction or interaction with the public. And we had drivers out there that had brought in the trucks and stuff, and they were able to talk to the drivers direct, and it made them it made them say, oh wow, they have family, they're out here making a living just like the rest of us. And that was the biggest issue. That was the biggest part of it that I thought was even more telling, was the fact they were actually able to shake hands with the truck driver and say thank you. And the driver was able to shake hands with him and say thank you for being safe around me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a man or woman behind the wheel. It's about people, it's about families. And as Jeff said, look, safety starts with the heart. There's got to be an emotional hook. If it's all data and all, numbers in the head and statistics, it doesn't work. So Jeff, thank you so much. And, again, we're going to have time on the panel. I see there's 3 questions already in the chat room. Keep them coming and I'll field those questions for all the panelists. So let's talk about technology, because truck technology really is raising the bar on safety rapidly. I'd like to introduce another friend, Jason Young from Freightliner from Daimler. And Jason's going to take us through on what's happening in the truck manufacturing process to raise the bar on freight safety. Jason, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Appreciate everybody joining today. I'm going to spend just a few minutes on some information on the vehicle itself and what truck OEMs, and this presentation is specific to Freightliner and Daimler products. It's the brand that we represent. But a lot of this technology applies to most all truck OEMs, and what we're doing to make not only the driver safer, but the public and all of the participants of the roadway as well. So go ahead, Brian. This is just a presentation that I had used previously, but it gives you a little bit of history about Daimler in and of itself, and the company history from kind of beginning to where we are today. Go ahead, Brian. So from a safety perspective on the trucks, there's kind of there's more than 4, but the 4 key categories that we like to focus on are, visibility, ergonomics, passive safety systems and active safety systems. Obviously, the first two, visibility and ergonomics, are tiered specific to the driver. But I think Brian and a lot of the trucking companies can attest that, you know, the more comfortable and the easier of an environment that the driver lives in every day makes him, you know, better rested, more alert, and safer, you know, overall. And we'll go into some specifics of each one of these here in the forthcoming slides. Go ahead, Brian. From a visibility perspective, I mean, some of these things seem relatively, you know, common sense or common knowledge, but they do make a tremendous difference to the driver. Specifically, the way that the windshield is shaped, protrusions in the windshield, how well the lighting of the truck is configured to help him see low light situations, no light situations, you know, as well as his entry and exit, you know, lighting, not only for him, but, you know, potentially for passengers and cars on the road, being able to physically see the truck, you know, in some even remote and rural areas. Go ahead, Brian. From an ergonomics perspective, I mean, and as I mentioned, this is specific, you know, to the driver, and what our focus is really a hands-on wheel approach. So, you know, trucking from the truck perspective, I guess it's advanced a long way, really in just the past 10 years. I mean, if you look at the picture here on the slide, the dash, I mean, that's basically what the driver sees as he's sitting in the seat. It's so much more automotive driven today than what it ever has been, from, you know, push to talk, you know, controls for his radio on the steering wheel to all of his, you know, gauge involvement. Everything is within arm's reach to keep the driver as the least amount of distracted as possible and give him as much information as he needs, but also keep his eye on the road and keep him, you know, focused on his job rather than trying to find the windshield wiper, you know, switch or turn the radio down and whatnot, which is a big improvement. So from the ergonomics, I mean, this is strictly from a driver's perspective, trying to make sure that they have a good opportunity and a comfortable way to get in and out of the truck. You know, Brian and those guys can tell you that, you know, slip and fall accidents are, you know, a big piece of what they're trying to prevent as well. Go ahead, Brian. So from talking about the passive safety systems, one of the main options that's available in trucks today is a system called Rolltech. But what this does effectively is when the truck senses it's in a rollover situation, the seat is pulled down into a locked position, and then an airbag is deployed over the overhead of the driver, and, you know, just to try to prevent, you know, additional injury to the driver as he's, you know, in a potential rollover situation. You know, this is it's a really neat feature. This is something that we hope they never have to use, but it's tailored to, you know, help prevent, you know, bigger injuries in the event of a major crash. So active safety systems is the biggest key, I think, to, you know, a safe driver and the, you know, which I guess passes on to, you know, the surrounding vehicles on the roadway. There's a lot of information, you know, a lot of options from an active safety, I guess, suite, if you want to call it that, on these trucks. However, we'll highlight a few of them here. One of them is tire pressure monitoring systems. This functions very similar to what you see in your passenger car. Few more tires, you know, in this configuration than what you see, you know, on your passenger vehicle, but it's real-time data giving the driver information on what his tire pressure is for post-trip, pre-trip, and even during, you know, his route.
And Jason, I would just point out, and I'm sure that Jeff sees it all the time, but improper tire pressure can yield some really bad outcomes. So
absolutely, yeah, and most drivers will tell you that, you know, they promised they did an adequate pre-trip, and a lot of them do, and things happen through the process. But this is a tool to help, you know, keep them up to speed and let them know, you know, hey, we have a potential issue or not.
I know a lot of the truck tires issues that we do see is regarding tread depth, wear, and things like that. As far as the flat tire and things, we understand that that occurs while on the road. That's just the nature of the beast. And with that tire, we're seeing more and more of the trucks when we do the inspections that have the tire monitoring systems that are love it, but it's just a mere fact that the drivers aren't, some of them aren't doing their free trip, and we got ball tires and tires with steel cords showing, but they're few and far in between now.
Absolutely. So this slide just really shows the effectiveness of individual, active safety system options and their deployment on trucks, from, the lane departure to speed warnings, following distance, rollover protection, and then rear end collisions. And it's pretty, pretty interesting information to see what the deltas are between having a system, deployed on your truck and not. And one thing I do want to reiterate, the systems that I'll talk about here moving forward, and then what we just did, these are collision avoidance systems. They're not collision prevention systems. The driver, is still in control of the truck, and that's why you go back to, the ergonomics and the visibility. We need to make sure that they have all the tools to do their job. These systems are implemented to help assist them in preventing, a potential accident. Go ahead, Brian. Brian put up a spreadsheet, during his video. This is kind of, an add-on to that, but it shows from a dollar figure through the DOT what the impact and cost is of, a collision accident and unfortunately a fatality, what the cost impact, to one of those failures are. And it's substantial, not to mention, as Brian said, the other side, not the dollars and cents, but this kind of puts things in perspective. And when we're talking to companies that aren't using, active safety systems or even passive in their fleet currently, the systems aren't free, obviously, but when you look at the potential impact, it's a very minimal cost, to do this moving forward. Go ahead, Brian. So Detroit Assurance is our, active safety system package, and this slide really represents from the walk of where we started effectively and then where we are today. So from 2.0 to 4.0 to 5.0. I won't spend much time on the previous trucks, but today inside of the Assurance suite, we've got active brake assist, there's a tailgate warning, adaptive cruise control, lane departure warnings, traffic sign display, intelligent high beams, automatic wipers, and then there's some active lane assist, side guard assist, and then some video capture features, which, all of these systems are tailored together, to work some independently, but also some in tandem. So the active brake assist, it has a forward-facing radar in the bumper of the truck paired with a camera that's forward-facing in the windshield. What it does, its primary function is, full braking on moving and stopped pedestrians, stationary objects, moving objects, and stopped objects. It also offers the tailgate warning, and now you can encourage drivers to utilize cruise control. With that feature, the truck will actually stop itself in cruise control to zero, whether he's not necessarily in a collision system or a situation, but it will just keep the mile per hour in the cruise control and stop the truck to zero. So the active brake assist, we kind of went through that. Adaptive cruise control effectively keeps the following distance. If the driver sets the speed limit to 65 miles an hour, a car is in front of them, it's going to maintain that distance that the truck is set to and increase or decrease the speed as necessary. Active lane assist is exactly what it describes. It's got in the steering box of the truck, it's physically steering the truck to keep it in the lane, back and forth. And then the side guard assist, we'll do another slide on this here in a second, but it's a radar mounted on the side of the step of the truck to alert the driver that in a swing clearance situation, as this picture notates, or if there's a vehicle in his blind spot, it alerts the driver to let him know that, hey, there's something there, and to be aware. So as I kind of mentioned, the active brake assist, this system is always on. It's always tracking vehicles. It's fused with the camera and the radar. I'm sorry, a camera in the windshield of the truck. And if the vehicle, what these pictures are showing is basically what this is a test that they've done to notate the system. If the truck is driving at any speed, there's a stopped object in front of it, the radar picks it up, it notates alerts, and it will physically stop the truck with no driver input if the driver does not, depress the brakes. As I mentioned in the previous slide, not only does the active brake assist function with a moving vehicle, it also will stop for pedestrians, as well as it will notate or follow pedestrians and full brake on a stopped pedestrian, which is a really neat feature for some in an urban, very urban and small environment. The forward-facing cameras, as we mentioned, that's combined with the bumper radar. Not only does it fuse for the active brake, but it also functions as a lane departure warning device. So it functions similar to like a rumple strip noise. So if the driver doesn't signal or swerves in and out of his lane, that camera is watching forward, recognizes stripes or markers on the road. The driver doesn't signal, he gets a rumple strip noise in one speaker or the other. Works, functions to two ways really to try to keep them, to remind them to signal. And number one, we see it function a lot with drowsy drivers when they fall asleep and they start to swerve out of the lane. It's loud enough to wake them up in some situations. Adaptive cruise control, we spoke about that just briefly. Maintaining the following distance, to the mile per hour, that the truck is set, and keeps the truck behind the vehicle that's in front of them at a safe following distance without any driver input. Intelligent high beams, a lot of the passenger cars have that now. This is relatively new for the trucking industry, but if you're in a low light situation, that camera in the dash or the windshield of the truck recognizes that, and it will actually turn the high beams on for the driver. So traffic sign display, this is a relatively new option as well. The camera in the windshield picks up on the speed limit sign for the area that the driver is in. It displays it in the dash cluster for them to see. It also will pick up signs for do not pass, and if it's in a truck route or a non-truck route, for that matter, it will pick that up and display that in the dash so that the driver understands, hey, look, you're in an area you shouldn't be in. Just an additional information and alert to tell the driver, hey, we need to think of a different route. Automatic wipers and headlamps. It kind of goes back to what I mentioned on the headlamps. Sensor in the windshield, rain light sensor automatically turns the windshield wipers on for the driver if needed. So the active lane assist, this is a relatively new feature for the industry as well. As I mentioned, it will physically steer the truck when the cruise control is engaged to keep the driver in the lane that he's in, and assist them effectively in certain situations to maintain that lane if needed. It's a little illustration that kind of shows what it's doing, but one of the complaints that we get often, or at times, I guess, from drivers is that, there's construction zone or there's different scenarios where this system needs to be deactivated. And so we've provided that opportunity for the driver to turn it off in a 15 to 20 minute sequence when it's depressed, to keep, to help that driver not have to fight the truck when he's in a construction zone or a certain other situation where it's not needed.
Sorry, Jason.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Lane keep assist. This is, another another function, another slide, effectively just showing, that the driver has the ability to adjust the settings in that system to favor one side of the road or the other, dependent on if there's less or more shoulder. So it gives them a little bit of flexibility to not be stuck in one position in that lane while this feature is activated. So the sideguard assist, this is a really interesting option that we have a very high take rate on. So it functions two ways. The picture kind of shows there's a sensor in the side of the step of the truck. The primary function is to alert the driver of an object in its blind spot. And it's, if you can imagine sitting in the driver's seat looking to the right-hand side, you'll see there's a light effectively. And if it's green, the driver's good. If it's red, then there's something there indicating that there's an object there. It also functions from a turn and sweep assist. So it does, not only does it understand there's a moving object, it also understands stationary objects about the height of a fire hydrant and taller. So if he's making a turn, the radar calculates that he's not going to make that turn effectively, and it will alert the driver that he's going to hit the stationary object.
Jason, I would just pop in and say that, blind spot accidents, called side swipes a lot of times, is one of the biggest, issues that we see. So this technology, think about our crowded freeways, think about congestion, think about more freight, more tonnage, more growth, right? So if this kind of technology can help us avoid one of the most common situations we see, which are those blind spot crashes.
Sure, and what's nice about that feature is that if the truck does not have a trailer, that system understands that. If it does have a trailer, basically just the 7-way plugged into the back of the truck, well, then it measures to the full length of the trailer. So they've got coverage on not only the tractor, but the trailer as well. The driver facing camera, that's a feature that's offered as well. A lot of the companies have their own independent, cameras. Brian's video, I think, had a good example of that. But that's another option as well.
And look, this day and age, I know this could be an argument, but I could not see running a trucking company without outward and inward facing cameras. It's the risk is too high. The risk of litigation is too high. And again, you want to know what's going on. You want to be able to coach your team. And quite frankly, if your driver was the ambassador of the road, which is very, very common, you want to know that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point. We spend a lot of time training drivers on, these systems, how they function, how they operate, and having video and feedback, from these systems either in action or working is an excellent tool to show, drivers and the public as well, hey, this is what we're doing to make the trucks, the drivers, and everyone safer. And it's about, to your point, buy-in. I mean, we've got to get everybody on board to say, look, if we all make a concerted effort, the ultimate goal is everyone will be safer. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Jason, thank you. It's really informative. People will look at the trucking company, for example, as we have the whole solution, right? It's the trucking company's responsibility. No, we've got a huge role in the process, but it takes everybody. It takes enforcement. It takes the traveling public. It takes meetings like this where we bring all these diverse perspectives together. And as I transition over to the National Safety Council, I just want to give one reflection on Jason's presentation. All of the oxygen in the public conversation has to do with driverless trucks. No human being in the truck. Now, we can hit this in the panel, but I'm just going to editorialize for a minute and say, yeah, I know the technology is there, but I don't see it happening anytime soon until we have a driverless infrastructure, until we have an infrastructure that has a seamless communication network. And if you look at the types of technology that Jason pointed out and showed us, technology, a lot of which we're using and our company is using, it's all about changing the driving experience. It's not about getting the driver out of the truck. These are fallacious stories. It's feel-good stuff, but it's about how to get the driver back in the truck. And this technology is changing the driver experience in an absolutely great way. And that should be our focus on technology. What's happening with all the manufacturers is wonderful, but we need to stay focused on the driver. And again, the idea that the driver is going to be kicked out of the truck in the next 5 years, I'll tell you what, when you're ready to get on a plane where the computer is allowed to flying with absolutely no pilot in the cockpit, maybe that's when we'll see it happening. Let's not hold our breath. Let's keep focused on the driver and how technology is changing for the better the driving experience. With that, I want to welcome a good friend, Deanne Crane with National Safety Council. I want to invite Deanne for a lot of reasons, but really the NSC has a wealth of resources for employers, for enforcement, for the public that I don't think sometimes we all know about. And so I wanted Deanne to do is talk to us about National Safety Council and specifically their Texas-based employer traffic safety program, which I've had the privilege to work with, called Our Driving Concern. So Deanne, welcome, and we hope this is the first of many contacts with our committee. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And it really is great to be here. And I'm really excited to follow up the rest of the panelists because some of the things that I think I'm going to communicate or comment on really adds to the conversation of the things that they've been talking about. And so our driving concern does have a shared mission, and that is to reduce motor vehicle incidents across the state of Texas. And so we do that by educating on safe driving behaviors on the job and off the job. And so we do that by providing tools and resources. And so I want to point out November 7th of the year 2000, that was the last deathless day on Texas roads. And so we are wanting to end that streak. So we're wanting to do our part in ending the streak. And so how do we do that? We do that through education. And our Driving Concern program is a program of the National Safety Council in cooperation with the Texas Department of Transportation. We are grant funded through TxDOT. And right now we have 2 programs that provide free training, education, and resources on transportation and driver safety topics. We work with key employees, which are risk leaders, safety leaders, managers, and supervisors to drive down safety messages to their employees. One of the ways we do that is through education. There you go. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, Deanne, tell me when to switch the slides.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So this is the slide that I want to talk about first, which is our the education area that we focus on. And we do that a couple of different ways. One is through our training. The 2 programs that we have right now is our ODC or our Driving Concern program that focuses on basic driving behaviors. And we have a traditional ODC training, and then we have a Fast Pass, which is kind of a crash course or a refresher course. And then we also have our DITY program, which is our drug impairment training for Texas employers. And then we have some deep dives, which kind of dive into that traditional DITY. So those are the 2 programs that we're working on right now. We also offer live webinars monthly, which are pretty interactive. And then we also record them and offer them as on-demand or recorded. The live webinars, sometimes we have guest speakers like Brian. And then we also have staff that present as well. And we do lots of topics. We have some coming up on things like rollover prevention, backing up. We have some impairment ones coming up. We really listen to the employers across the state of Texas as what they're looking for in those webinars, and then we pull those together. The last thing we have is our LMS system. It's a new system that we've rolled out this last spring. It is the self-guided or self-paced part of our education. That's where we house our micro-learning units, our driver safety games, fun quizzes. Our on-demand webinars are on there. It's a really easy single login or single login portal. And so we have our LMS system as well. The next slide, Brian. The other thing that accompanies our education is our resources. And so we are not a canned program, we're a customizable program. And so you want to have a comprehensive driver safety program. And I think you've heard from the fellow panelists how important education and safety is within your organization. And so we are there to help you either build that program or enhance that program. And you want to have that program be consistent and ongoing. And so we offer a lot of resources on the different driver or transportation topics. So we have a lot of direct, which is the education piece, and then the indirect with some of the resources like posters that are interchangeable. You can keep those topics fresh in your high traffic areas. We have pre-made safety talks. We have monthly newsletters that you can get ideas from. We have video clips that you can either use on like your intranet or your use them in your safety talks. We have a looping file. We have toolkits and policies, examples, and a lot of things that are directly on our website. They're electronic where you can just download them. So we have a lot of resources that are available at your fingertips to use. And then we also are available to help you kind of navigate through the things that you are looking for or trying to build your program. The next slide. This is something that I really am excited to talk about. TxDOT has awarded us another program that we are going to be starting in October, and it is called Safe Texas for Every Pedestrian. So again, as you saw the other panelists talking about this multimodal transportation initiative, we're looking at that initiative too, and we are going to be including a focus on pedestrian safety. Every employee at any given time is a driver or a pedestrian. And so we've included pedestrian safety within our, basic our driving concern component, but this program will allow us to focus, on pedestrian safety and be able to provide some resources on that topic alone and incorporate that in with our our driving concern program and then our impairment program as well. So be watching for some new exciting things on pedestrian safety, as that's really an important aspect that we're going to be able to provide resources on. The next one. The last thing that I really want to talk about is some other resources besides the Our Driving Concern. The Our Driving Concern and the DIDI program, and then our new pedestrian one is solely based in Texas. And then our NSC resources are also ones that you can access on the National Safety Council website. One is our Check to Protect program, and this campaign deals with unrepaired recalls. There are a lot of vehicles on the road that have unrepaired recalls, and it's very easy to go to this site, put a VIN number in, and check the recall status, and then schedule repairs if necessary. And they even have a place to put in multiple fleet vehicles at one time. So it's a great resource for organizations to use, and then also promote to your employees to check their recall status and see if they need to have repairs scheduled. The Drive at Home is an actual one that talks about teen drivers. And so it's an added benefit to be able to talk to your employees about maybe they've got teen drivers at home. And you can send those resources home with them if they've got new teen drivers, or being able to set that example for their families at home. So that's a great opportunity to be able to send things home for the family. MyCarDoesWhat.org is a great example. Jason was talking about, the actual what the technology does in the big trucks. MyCarDoesWhat.org is talking about, just our regular vehicles and all of the technology that we have just in, our personal vehicles. And so that is a great site that you can send your employees to as well, to kind of navigate through what our personal vehicles are able to do as far as technology these days. And then the Road to Zero Coalition is a coalition of the National Safety Council that has addresses additional transportation safety. There's a lot of information on that coalition site. And then last but certainly not least is the National Child Passenger Safety Board. It is a program of the National Safety Council. It's been around since the 90s, and it promotes safety and saving lives, preventing injuries through child passenger safety. Then the next slide is my last slide, and I just wanted to reinforce the Our Driving Concern program by letting you know our website is txdrivingconcern.org. I encourage all of you to check it out, look at all of the resources. You're able to go in and register for any of our trainings or our webinars. You might even see Brian there at some point. And then also my contact information. You can contact me at any time if you want to learn more about us. If you want to sign up for the newsletters, you can do that on site, or again, you can always email me. I'll be happy to talk to you about your transportation safety programs and how we can help you enhance your programs or get your programs started. So again, I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you guys having me, and that's all I have.
Deanne, thank you so much. I think one of the takeaways is that there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, the National Safety Council is an incredible organization. There's a lot of things we can do to raise the bar on traffic safety, freight traffic safety right now without reinventing the wheel, if we just know where to find the resources. And Deanne's group, Our Driving Concern, National Safety Council, is a great place to start. Obviously, we're focused on road safety, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of the better resources that we use annually, like clockwork, was developed by the rail industry. And it's called Operation Lifesaver. It's a free program. I think it's a video download. At least they used to do live training if you wanted. I'm not sure if they do that anymore, but the video is great. So there's a lot of risk at rail crossings. And I think the rail industry, by putting together Operation Lifesaver, has just done a phenomenal service to the public and to the trucking industry in particular, by teaching people the right way to behave around dangerous rail intersections. So again, there's a lot of information out there already. It's a matter of, can our committee, can the HGAC be a conduit to better distribute the information? And I'm hoping that's what comes out of this. So let's now talk about infrastructure, and let's talk about where we are with dangerous freight corridors in our area, and how and what's TxDOT's plan going forward to improve freight safety from their angle. And I'd like to welcome Sherry. Pfeiffer, is that how I pronounce your last name?
Yes, that's correct.
Got it right. Welcome, and I'll go ahead and continue to drive with the slides. Just tell me when to switch them. Thank you very much.
Great. Go ahead to the next slide. And as he mentioned, I'm Sherry Pfeiffer. I'm the Freight Systems Branch Manager for TxDOT. And thank you so much for having me today. There's been a lot of great information. I'm not going to read statistics to you all because I think we can all safely say that we've been in Houston and we've been in congestion and we've been in traffic, whether it's because of peak hour or because of an accident. But 6 of the top 10 most congested truck roadways are in the Houston region. That's 610, I-10, I-45, the East Tex Freeway is actually number 2 in the state, behind I-35. And Harris County also has the highest number of commercial vehicle accidents in Texas, and the highest number of injury crashes for truck and trailers. but it's the second highest for fatalities for truck tractor crashes. So there's definitely a lot of safety work to do here. Next slide, please. I took a little bit of a different approach. I wanted to look at crashes involving parked trucks because it's not always a truck that's just traveling down those corridors I listed. There's a lot of trucks, as you've all seen, parked on the side of the road, whether it's on the shoulder of a ramp or a frontage road or even on the side of a highway. And to give a little background on that, we've interviewed a lot of truck drivers to talk about unauthorized truck parking. And a lot of times it's because they're waiting for an appointment and there's no parking available at the shipper. So they're trying to park as close as possible so they don't miss an appointment and get shuffled all around. But at the same time, there's not enough available parking. So as you can see, I've listed out the 4 corridors, I-10, I-45, 610, and I-69. And, there's the most crashes on I-45 with 71 parked truck crashes and 5 of those being fatal. You can see on the map, the fatalities are the red dots. And most of those are kind of on the outskirts. And what that kind of tells us is sometimes that means they've probably parked in an unsafe area and another truck hit them or a vehicle hit them. So something TxDOT's really working on is truck parking. Next slide, please. In Houston, something that's different from any other district, there is no state safety rest areas in the Houston district. You'll see some in the Beaumont district and one in the Yoakum district. But within the Houston district, there isn't any truck parking provided by the state of Texas. So we rely on the private sector to provide all of that. What that translates to is we have a shortage of truck parking of approximately 970 spaces. That's our estimation based on ATRI data that we used for the statewide truck parking study. And the highest capacity need in Houston is really all of Houston, because if you east and west of Houston, and I'm sure there could be some use for truck parking near the port. During our statewide truck parking study, we were able to identify some opportunity areas, and we found 8 east of Houston for new truck parking facilities. As you can see, those big red dots, those are representing the number of the high capacity need in that region, and that's the greater shortage in those areas. Off towards Katy, you can see 2 big red dots. And, we all know there's a lot of industry there. There's rooms to go. I feel like Igloo maybe, or Coleman's over there. And it's just, you'll often see those trucks just parked on the side of the road trying to get into the gate. So it tells us we need truck parking, not just for overnight, but also for staging. Next slide, please. So one thing Texas is doing to address this is we applied for an ATC MTD grant in I believe it was 2018, and it was awarded in late 2019, and we kicked off in early 2020 to implement a truck parking information system across Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California on the I-10 corridor. So in Texas, because we have the largest span, we're installing 18 truck parking information systems that you can see on that map there. So if you look over at Houston, like I mentioned, we don't have any in the Houston district, but you'll have locations with truck parking information systems in, I think it's Chambers County and also Colorado County. This is something that we're working pretty hard on. We're working with the I-10 Corridor Coalition. So that's a little bit like herding cats, trying to get 4 states to agree upon things, but it's really a great project. We've got design concepts underway, and we're testing out some technology options. I was recently at WashTow, and actually saw some really cool demos on how you can capture this information. And this is really creating safer corridors for both trucks and passenger vehicles, because the more we can provide information and take trucks off of the corridors that are parking unsafely or potentially driving unsafely because they're tired and they've run out of hours, but they can't find a place to park. Our construction's underway, and that will go live in July of 2023. And another thing we did is actually this year, we submitted a second ATC MTD grant. We want to expand TPAS to I-35, I-45, and I-20. And this would allow us to really expand this all statewide, because drivers make decisions 100 miles out. You know, if they're delivering in Beaumont, they've already got decisions made in Columbus, Texas. If they're coming, you know, from the West, they already know where they want to stop, where they want to park. But if it's a new driver and they're coming into town, they don't know where the parking's at. And this is something we really need to address, because I-45 is another big corridor where you have so much freight coming up and down the corridor between Dallas and Houston. And this is a place that we can provide drivers safe places to park with the up-to-date real-time information, telling them this is where you can park, this is available. And the safety piece that Judge Emmett brought up, you know, it's really a big picture thing, because if you think about it, most of us wouldn't stop in a dark parking lot to sleep. We wouldn't sleep on the side of the road in our car. We would want a place that was well lit and secure. So this is guiding drivers to those places. And what's great about TPAS is you can pair it with other technologies. So it would go, this data will be available to private truck parking apps like Park My Truck. They can pull it up and they can say, oh, look, there's at this rest area, there will be 12 spaces available. I'm going to go there. We can also put it on drivetexas.org. So dispatchers and drivers will be able to get that. And what I learned at WashTow is some of these in-cab systems actually will communicate this audibly to drivers so that they're not pulling out their smartphone. Next slide, please. Another thing I want to talk about is the technology piece from our Freight Network Technology and Operations Plan. We finished that in November of 2020. And I'm going to highlight just two of the concepts of operations that we identified as pieces of technology that can truly improve our safety, our mobility of freight, and also the safety of passenger vehicles around. I can't recall who mentioned it, but the bridge strikes, 22 bridge strikes in 2020, 10 in 2021. This is where safety warning detection system, we have, I believe we already have one in Houston, but we all know several locations that something like that for bridge strikes could be installed. In speaking with the DMV, I actually heard from them, a lot of the drivers that strike those bridges are not only following the wrong GPS, as was mentioned previously, a lot of those drivers don't even have permits, so they're not looking at a permitted route. So this is just another element of security and safety to say, you know, hey, this bridge is only 4 foot or 14.6. You need to exit. But that's not the only option. We can also look at having a weigh in motion. Is your truck too heavy to cross this smaller bridge? Because freight's not just moving on the interstates. We all know that we have farm to markets that we see heavy trucks on, and there is limitations on some of these bridges. Another thing would be curve detection. And I see that as something, especially when there's congestion, having just an extra layer of safety to say, pay attention, you know, this curve is coming up, because trucks can't see the cars all around them or behind them very often, because a lot of drivers don't realize if you're following too closely, they can't see you. So that helps. But also looking at, excuse me, blocked rail crossing detection. That's another safety warning detection system that we have looked at, and I've actually worked with our railroad division on, what can we do to help at grade crossings? Next slide, please. The next technology piece is just smart freight connectors. This is many different types of ITS technology that we could implement on some of these critical freight routes, whether it's last mile deliveries. So to me, I think of the ports, or coming in from the port and maybe to one of the container yards, or container yard to rooms to go out on I-10. We need things such as traffic lights that prioritize freight movement, so that if they see, 9 tractor trailers lined up, they can't accelerate like a vehicle. So that's going to create that congestion of trucks lined up, bumper to bumper, trying to get through a light, when you can optimize your signals to accommodate those vehicles, and it would just create a smoother flow of traffic. Again, weigh in motion is another piece of it. T-Pass is another one. And that's why we call them smart freight connectors, because if you can implement, whether it's one or all of these on some of these really high traffic freight corridors, this is going to optimize traffic, optimize routes, and just improve mobility and safety overall. What we're working on right now in the freight branch, we just finished these 2 studies, truck parking and freight network technology and operations in 2020. And now we're working on advancing those things. So we started the 2023 Texas Freight Mobility Plan. We kicked that off in July, and we've got to move fast and furious because it has to be into FHWA in 2023 by March. So that means I submit in January. And there's a lot of pieces, including technology and truck parking, that the Federal Highways is actually looking for us to include. These are ways for us, without building new infrastructure, to create safer and more reliable corridors for both freight traffic and passenger vehicles. We'll have some upcoming stakeholder engagement meetings in the end of October and early November. And Veronica, I'd like to share those with you so you can share it with your members as well, just to make sure we get, a really broad spectrum. We love to hear from not just, local communities, elected officials, but also the drivers themselves and operations managers. That's how we can develop and progress forward to implement some of these things to ensure the safety of traveling public. And I believe that is it for me. If anyone has questions, wants to email me or anything, please don't hesitate to contact me. I know that was pretty fast, but we went through a lot of information today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. So in the, inside of a 2-hour period, we've covered the gamut here. I mean, if you think about the various perspectives, TxDOT, NSC enforcement, the HGA presentations, we've really, I think, painted a very comprehensive picture of our challenges. And we have a little time for Q&A, and we can either take them live, or we can use the Q&A and the chat function. But Sherry, I'm going to come back to you with the first question, and I hope everybody will jump in on the panel with comments, questions. But we've talked about different stakeholders in the process, and listening to you talk about truck parking, there's one stakeholder we really haven't talked about, and that's the shipper, the consignee, the warehouse. Okay, even though they may not be running their own trucks on the roads, they have a responsibility for traffic safety too. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we actually talked about in the truck parking study is, the shippers, when they build, say, a 200,000 square foot Amazon facility, Their land use says you need X number of parking spaces, 4.2 trees, this much green space, but there's no requirement for a truck parking spaces. Even if they say we're going to have 75 dock doors, there is no requirement for them to have truck parking spaces. So one of the recommendations that came out of our truck parking study was for us to facilitate conversations between the public and private sector and talk about land use and say, if you can become one of the things you can become is a preferred shipper. One of those is Hershey's in Pennsylvania. They provide truck parking, a driver lounge, and many drivers say they love it because they get candy when they leave. But it's the little things, that we don't think about when it comes to truck parking. And so, yes, it absolutely needs to be on the shippers. I've heard ideas of what if they did a co-op where they provided staging in their industrial area where they all together have a staging area for these trucks to park at. So it's definitely a part of the conversation. We just haven't made it that far yet.
And I appreciate that. I think the shippers need to be engaged more and more in the conversation because this really is everybody's responsibility. I'm thrilled to hear that that's part of the dialogue. Because again,
absolutely.
When you see those trucks lined up on the side of the road, we all know they don't want to be there. I mean, that's
right.
that's not a preference of a professional driver, but sometimes it's the only choice. And if we can solve that collaboratively with the shippers, the warehouses, all the better.
Yes.
A couple questions in the live chat. I think this one is probably for Jason. I'm going to read the question, but I'm not totally sure I understand it. So we made some clarification, but it's, what technology advances have been made to adjust for safer truck operations to allow for load differences, fully loaded versus empty? Maybe that's because when you're empty, you have less traction. But I'll start with you, Jason, but if anybody else can answer the question, it's sort of like, how is technology helping the driver if the technology knows the driver is, got 80,000 pounds or just has an empty trailer?
Right, and that is a good question. I think that at this point, the technology that's available, I'm not aware of anything that the truck can do, to understand, whether it's loaded or not, and then adjust accordingly. There are, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, there's onboard truck scales that are available to be installed that shows driver real-time weights of what they're hauling, but nothing that's active or even passive safety that the truck can do at this point.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts about that question?
Yeah, it's Jeff Tippett. One of the things we're seeing with regards to the systems, particularly with some of the intermodal, the new permits that are allowing 93,000 to 100,000, is a roll stability system that's implemented onto the chassis itself with a sensor arm, along with sensors that will feel the load as far as the weight. It'll move the arm a certain amount. Then it also, as they make a turn or going through a curve or whatever, the sensors will also pick up the lean of the vehicle and will start applying the brakes. The ABS systems automatically. Granted, it requires ABS systems to function properly throughout the entire truck and trailer, and that's one of the things that the drivers do check for. But they do have that technology out there as well. It's called the roll stability system. Bendex is probably the leader on it, along with Haldex right behind them.
Thank you, Jeff. Another comment from what Sherry said about using the infrastructure that we have now, and a lot of what she shared is how to optimize the use of the infrastructure. And let's not forget evenings and weekends. I was involved with the Port of Houston's efforts last go around. This is probably 6 years ago, where the port moved so many mountains to stay open till 11 o'clock at night. And it was a brilliant effort, but it didn't work because, we would show up, right? You could show up at the port, but if you have nowhere to go with the cargo, it creates more problems down the road. But, we as a community not just the trucker, not just the port. We need to think about how we can use our infrastructure more efficiently. And I think that's critical, because the evenings and weekends where there's less congestion, it's a lot better for our drivers than running in the middle of rush hour. So let me see if I've got any other. There's another question. I don't know if we can really address it, but I'll turn this over to our friends at HGAC. But there's a question about Barge, and how does Barge play into the equation? And conceptually, I understand that Barge, if we could do it right and scale it up, that could take pressure off the roads, because you could move more and more containers by barge. So the question becomes, is Barge sufficiently in our dialogue in the Greater Houston Freight Committee and HGAC? If not, how do we bring Barge in more?
Let me take on that. Barge was in the Ports Area Mobility Study. They did do a brief evaluation of cost-benefit analysis of the container on barge system that was being piloted out of the Port of Houston. And while we believe that this is something that's completely valuable, there isn't as much information on it, but we feel like this is definitely one of the ways that we really want to move. It reduces emissions. They're able to move, much more cargo between ports than you could by truck. And I think over time they'll have some additional cost efficiencies. Maybe Bruce can expound a little bit more about that particular case study that was performed, but we do see it as something that's like something that's valuable and needs to be studied further.
Yeah, we're still doing a container on barge study. I think one of the things you have to factor in is, you tie up wharf capacity when you put a barge there instead of a ship. So it's a lot more efficient to unload a ship than it is a barge. So you've got to weigh the use of the container terminals when you start looking at that. So because we were built to offload vessels, ships, not barges, and there's just a lot more positives associated with offloading a ship than there is a barge. So it's a balance, though. We want to be supportive of how freight moves, and if there's a market, we'll move the market. But it's not a straightforward, let's just put everything on barge and take it to the port, because that's not going to work.
Thanks, Bruce. We have a little bit more time, so if anybody has any other questions or comments for the panel, I'd like to keep it open.
Mr. Tippett from LaPorte PD asks, does a company or agency need to be a member of NSC to access the resources?
Deanne.
Can you say that one more time?
Does a company or agency need to be a member of NSC to access the resources?
No, so there are certain resources that are free. So the Our Driving Concern resources are free because we are grant funded by TxDOT. So any of the txdrivingconcern.org, everything is free, which is great, especially for companies that maybe have a small training budget or safety budget. But for anybody, it's free. And then the ones that I went over, the National Safety Council, like the Check to Protect, and some of the other ones, they do have some of those resources that are free for everyone. And then obviously they do have some member only services as well. So if someone is interested, they can email me, and then I can kind of help them navigate our resources through Our Driving Concern, and then also help them navigate those free resources through the National Safety Council.
And Deanna, if anybody needs your contact information, just reach out to Veronica, or I'd be glad to provide it. And I believe, Veronica, today's session has been recorded too, right?
Yes, this session has been recorded and will be available online soon.
Very good. So let me ask: are there any other questions for the panel or otherwise?
Is Jeff still here?
Tippett?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Hey, great. My question is really, how do you balance enforcement for truck parking when there's not enough capacity for truck parking? It wouldn't seem like just writing tickets is the answer when there's no alternative. So I'm just wondering how you guys balance that.
A lot of things, what we're doing is trying to find a place for the drivers to go. You would think in our area of down in LaPorte with the major ports of Bayport and Barber's Cut, along with the warehousing, we would have a lot more parking, and unfortunately, we do not. We do see them on the side of the roads and at night, and they tell us, hey, I'm out of hours, I got to move. I tell them, put yourself on personal conveyance on your ELD. Here's my name, here's my badge number. Let me tell you where there's some other trucks other areas that you could park at. Unfortunately, we're very limited in our area, and in fact, limited anywhere and everywhere up and down 225, 146, even into Baytown, which is where I can go into Baytown, but we try to get them to places. As far as issuing citations, speaking for myself, I haven't, because I understand the plight with with the drivers trying to find parking. And again, on the federal level, we tried to get through the American Trucking Association's Law Enforcement Advisory Panel. We pushed to speak with the reps, passing the truck parking bill, trying to get that included in the transportation bill, and it failed. It was pulled. But as far as issuing the citations and stuff, that's it. In our unit that I'm in, we view that as an improper tactic to go to them, to the driver. They're trying to do what's right. They're limited, and we're just going to try to help them get to someplace safe. That's not to say all of them are like that, but for our unit, I can speak that we were very, very reluctant to even think of issuing a citation, let alone a warning citation. We just tell them, hey, put yourself on personal conveyance. Here's where you need to go. Put my name and my badge number in there, and that meets the federal requirements as far as the ELD and hours of service. So they may exceed it, but as long as they mark it personal conveyance as directed by the law enforcement, they're good to go to the next available spot, not to the delivery if it's way on down the road. Just to clarify that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And Brian, Judge Emmett, great meeting. Lots of good content. Appreciate you guys putting this together.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Let me just ask. I'm going to keep the floor open for any more questions. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Judge Emmett to wrap up this part. Then we'll turn it back to Veronica for some closing business and announcements. So, any other questions for the panel?
Brian, I have one question. This is Hugh McCully. Can I speak?
Hi, Hugh. Of course. How are you?
Fine, thanks. This has been a great presentation. You know, in the railroad industry, we do not allow train crews to speak on the cell phone while they're operating trains. I've noticed that most truck drivers on the Houston freeways are talking on their cell phones. What is the overall company policy about that? And if they do prohibit it, how can they enforce it? But it seems to me, speaking on the cell phone while you're driving a big tractor trailer rig is definitely increasing the level of danger.
Yeah, I think, and Jeff, I think can back me up on this, but the use of handhelds in interstate commerce is, I think it's federally prohibited. And I think it's a potential $12,000 violation to the employer and like $2,000 to the employee. But it happens. And from our standpoint, we've got life critical rules. We call them the Serious Six. I mean, you have to have some, if everything's important, nothing's important. And we're drowning in a sea of rules and regulations. So we've got our Serious Six, and one of those is using a handheld, right? So it's, it's kind of career limiting. In other words, as an employer, you got to walk the walk. You can't just talk about it. And that plus the camera technology, plus just enhanced training has helped us. You've got to have people that you trust to do the right thing when nobody's looking, because you can't monitor every driver. There's no question, though, that absent some extreme emergency, there's just not a reason to be not to have both hands on the wheel. Now, Hugh, you'll have some people say that, if you're using a Bluetooth piece, you're cognitively distracted. It's just as distracting as, having the phone up to your ear. And I think we all can probably understand that, because we could be mentally distracted with no technology at all, such that we're not on the road. That's where the judgment comes in, right? Because if, so what we try and do, if we have, as long as our drivers are hands-free, we don't want long conversations, not at home and not with dispatch. But you do want, let's say a driver's load cancels, right? You don't want to wait for that driver to be parked 200 miles further down the road. You want to be able to at least call the driver and say, hey, there's been a change, get yourself safely pulled over and give me a call. That's a balancing act. That's a judgment call. And I realize it's imperfect, but to your core point, there's no excuse for using a handheld phone while you're driving a CMV, or quite frankly, a passenger vehicle. And there are federal laws on that, but I really think it more stems from the company culture. If the office is calling you every 5 minutes, you're probably apt to use that phone. So it really takes public and private enforcement. And I think it's more what the employers do than even is the federal rule book. Let me open it up to other comments, though. That's just my 2 cents on it.
It is a federal law. It is on the federal books as far as hands-free device. You get caught with the phone up to your ear, and as opposed to the Texas law, which basically has no teeth to it, the federal law has plenty of teeth to it. And if I'm not mistaken, I think on a third conviction, it could leave up to 6 months suspension of your driving privileges. Most companies take a first-time violation as a termination offense, but we do see it. Unfortunately, when we're investigating accidents, here they come driving by and they're holding their phones up to take pictures of all things of the accidents. And some of the guys out there will start marking down DOT numbers and make phone calls saying, hey, this is what we saw with your truck number, whatever. Would you mind telling them not to do that anymore? We're going to get them next time. But it is a federal regulation regarding the use of cell phones. It has to be a hands-free device, such as with the ELDs. They have to be hands-free and unable to operate it when they reach, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Felco, 5 miles per hour. Some of them can change that, but I think it's 5 miles per hour is the standard in the industry. And the same thing with the cell phones. You did mention emergency. If it's an emergency situation, then yes, they can have it up there, but they better be able to justify the emergency situation.
I'll just jump in there just from the education side. I think it's really important to have clear policies that are communicated frequently, not just at onboarding and when they're updated. I think you have to have those in front of your employees frequently so that they know what they are. And again, like Brian said, you have to walk the talk from the top down. And then your education, you have to have consistent and ongoing education about all of your driver safety behaviors, and distraction behind the wheel is an important one. So I'll just reiterate that.
Thank you, Dan. Other comments?
Yeah, can you hear me? It's John Ravansky. Yeah, you
Hi,
can.
John.
Okay. Hi. I just wanted to say, first off, that I think this has been a great session. And I've been a shipper pretty much my entire career on the shipper side. I think there's so much that the shipper can do also to enhance safety. And I mean, I've worked for Celanese and Oxaya for all those years as a hazmat shipper. And one of the things we need to make sure that we do as an industry is making sure that we're picking safe carriers, legal carriers, making sure everything is properly labeled, secured before it heads out the door. Placards match the bill of lading, etc. And then also just never compromise safety on a delivery. For example, if you don't tell them to hit the gas, you got to be there at 8 o'clock, or the customer's going to be upset. It's one of those things where you just can't compromise safety on it. So again, great session today, and really appreciate what you guys are doing out there.
Thank you, John. It's great to hear the shipper's perspective too, because again, if the shipper is pushing the driver, how the shipper treats the driver, or if the shipper holds the driver up for 4 hours and that impacts the driver's ability to make an on-time delivery. Now, what does that do to distraction? What does that do to the driver independent of any technology? So the shipper really does have a role. And I know things had to roll back and sort of distance their way through COVID, but as we get into the post-COVID era, hopefully soon, let's make sure that drivers have a place to go. Let's make sure that the shippers are accommodating to drivers at their locations and rolling out a little bit of the red carpet. We're not looking for a full course buffet, but just a place to have a cup of coffee and access to a restroom would be nice. And we are in such a truck driver shortage. I'm telling you right now that drivers have a lot of control as to where they go. And they're going to go to shippers of choice. I'll tell people only half jokingly that I'm no longer in the trucking business. I'm not. I'm done with that. I'm in the driver service business. And that's really what we do. And shippers of choice will have a great advantage getting capacity in a tight market if they care about the people servicing them, the professional drivers servicing them.
Yep, very good. No, I agree. Shipper of choice is going to be the way to go.
Absolutely. Well, let's see if other questions. They're great questions so far. Okay, well, Ed, if you want to bring this portion home, and then we'll turn it over to Veronica, and we'll finish
question.
Oh,
we have one
got
question
another
that
one.
popped up. Yep.
Okay.
Andrew Johnson says that one item that doesn't get covered enough is cargo securement. Having been involved in securement for over 10 years in rail, intermodal, and truckload, I firmly believe that not enough drivers/shippers have enough training on securement. I responded to the UP container explosion back in 2018 as the risk manager. The issues that were involved in that incident were alarming. So we do have a few rail people on the call.
Yeah, that's great. Jeff, you want to start off on securement? And I know you've seen your share.
Yes, I have. That is one of the issues that we have is the securement issues. Mostly what I see is in the containers when they're coming off the ships, the drivers have no control over that, as well as when they're picking them up at the docks, at the warehouses, or from the shippers themselves. The doors are already closed and sealed. But in that aspect, it's where their driver is relying upon the shipper. In the same aspect, we do see drivers with 3-footers and the driving and the flatbeds, in which they do have the opportunity to secure it properly, and they take the shortcut. So they're using the securement devices that they're using is defective. And the ones we do see in that are the independent owner, the one truck operations, their shoestring budget, and they're trying to get by with as minimal cost as possible, and we're quickly to point it out to them. And those are the ones that we do see the problems with. The bigger companies, when we do find it, it's because of it's not so much the lack of training, it's a lack of care by the driver themselves, and they're not wanting to put forth the effort, or as Mr. Felton pointed out, the buying into the culture itself of being safe and doing it properly. They want to save that extra few minutes, and one of the things that we try to enforce upon them, not only with citations and fines, but it's also to let them know you took an extra 20 minutes to secure a load. Something happens down the road, now you're going to look at an extra 20 hours to 20 days from cleanup to litigation to downtime to equipment replacements and all that. It's your decision, but we're fixing to educate you on your decision. One of the things that I point out to a lot of the safety people that do come out is that there is an excellent, free to all of them, a complete cargo securement guide on the FMCSA's website. And also you got your Concrete Pipe Haulers Association that puts out a great program, a great access to information on how to secure concrete pipe. And at times I'm amazed that a lot of them go, they have that stuff on the FMCSA, and that's one of the educational aspects of it that I don't think we're putting out enough, is the amount of free information and training that's out there through the feds, through National Safety Council, through TXTA, as well as through DPS. And that's one of the aspects, that's one of the things that we keep showing them and telling them, that you've got to download this stuff, you've got to go over it with your drivers and harp on it and maintain that culture holding their feet to the fire. They mess up. Here's what the matrix is on discipline and all that, and stick to it. Don't let it vary. But as far as the cargo securement, when we do see the issues, it's with the single truck operations that they're trying to cut the budgets, and that's where I've seen the issues at, and some of the other officers in law enforcement see the same thing. That and others that just don't care, and that's sad. But we're hoping to get rid of to change that culture, along with this and several other organizations that we're doing.
A couple of thoughts to add. First of all, I really want to underscore, like what Jeff was saying, because Houston is one of the hubs of international trade, we have a lot of imports, and they could be import containers, they could be import crated boxes, right? And the driver can't see what's in there. And, a lot of import cargo is not secured to the same standards that, packing houses in Houston would adhere to. So it's important that as best as possible, you know what's in there, but that's really difficult. I mean, it hasn't happened a lot, but we've had things fly out of crates. Let's say the driver has to put the brakes on, maybe somebody cut the driver off. All of a sudden, the car goes out of the crate, and it's invariably import. So, making sure, having standards, having better standards that apply to imports would go a long way. But when it comes to domestic freight, one thing to remember about regulations is every regulation prescribes the bare minimum. And what you got to do is go beyond compliance. So for example, the law tells you how you have to secure a flatbed, how many straps per feet. We always require penalty straps. We call them penalty straps, just meaning that whatever the law requires, we add more, because we want to make the point that we go above and beyond. What if the strap gives out? What if there's a problem with the strap, right? You put the penalty straps on for peace of mind. Another thing that we've done that probably has gotten rid of more securement issues than anything else I can think of is when a driver ties down his load, he's got to take a picture of it, or she has to take a picture of it from 4 different angles and send it to the office. So we'll do an office review of every open deck load we've got. And that helps us catch things. But just the act of taking a picture, just the act of having to take a picture is really what creates accountability. So there's ways to raise the bar on it, but there's no question that, cutting corners, cheaping out on the materials, using bad straps, all of that, take it to its logical conclusion. Something flies off the truck through the windshield of a car, and you kill a young family. And it's happened on our roadways, a lot. And so it's an excellent point that Andrew raised. Veronica, I keep trying to move it over to Ed, and you keep coming up with more questions. So let me ask you again, do we have any other questions? Because this has been absolutely great conversation, and I don't want to cut it off.
There are no additional questions, and we're
okay.
in our 12-minute mark.
Okay, Ed, take it away, and then Veronica, you'll bring us home. Guys, thank you. I want to thank the panel so much for your time, and thank everybody for the time to listen, and I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Brian, thank you for organizing today's event. It's really been good. And for all those who participated, the panelists and the audience, I'm going to reiterate one more time. Transportation is one of those things that the general public tends to take for granted. And when they do look at it, they look at transportation assets in terms of themselves without thinking about freight. And that's what this committee is all about. That's what the Texas Department of Transportation Freight Advisory Committee is about, because without a robust, viable transportation system, highway, rail, barge, all of the components, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And right now there's a lot of conversation going on about the need to expand highways or improve highways, what to do with trains, all those things. But it's going to take people like you who are participating in this program today to start speaking out. Even things like whether you're talking about letters to the editor or when there's a story that appears, people comment on those stories. My wife always told me, don't read those comments when you're in the political world. Well, I'm out of the political world now. Those of us who have some facts need to start using those facts to help shape policy. And that today was a great step forward. So thank you again, Brian. Thank you all participants. And Veronica, I'll give it back to you.
Great. Again, just like my co-chairs, I thank you for the wonderful presentations and informative ideas. I can tell you it sparked a number of ideas for myself and for participating in this. Just a few quick announcements. The Transportation Policy Council meeting is September 24th from 9:30 to 11 a.m. The Transportation Advisory Committee meeting is October 13th, 2021, 9:30 to 12. And the next Greater Houston Freight Committee meeting will hopefully maybe have a hybrid meeting. I don't know. Is December 16th, 2021 at 1 p.m. to 3:30.
Thank you. Veronica, do we lose you?
You know, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. All right, thanks for those dates. And again, if people want a copy of of today's session or any of the presentations, just let us know. Thanks again to the panelists, and thanks again to Judge Emma, to Ed for his steadfast years of leadership in our region. Couldn't do it without him. And let's keep this dialogue going. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Have a great day.